Dr. Anthony Fauci says he will step down from his post in 2024, no matter who the president is by then. On Wednesday, Fox News anchor Neil Cavuto asked the nation's top infectious disease expert if he would continue to serve in government if Donald Trump were reelected to the White House, to which Fauci responded, "Well, I'm not going to get involved in any politics about who is or is not going to be in the White House."
Joining us now to weigh in is our rising panel. Rebecca Azor is a political journalist, and Emily Jashinsky is a culture editor at The Federalist and co-host of Rising Fridays. Welcome to you both.
Good morning.
Thank you.
So, Emily, do you make anything of this? Is it just, a man who is already in his early 80s, preparing to retire no matter what at the end of the administration? Or are people really reading into this a reluctance to get back into another Trump administration, or a lack of confidence that Joe Biden is actually going to win in 2 years?
Well, yeah, I don't know that we can take anything Anthony Fauci says without just a massive grain of salt at this point. So whether it's about policy or his retirement plans, I just have a hard time believing him. But also, he's set to give, actually Forbes calculated this about a year ago, he's set to get one of the biggest retirement packages, actually the biggest retirement package according to Forbes in American history when he does retire. Something like $350,000 a year. Before that was from the analysis about a year ago. So I don't know why he hasn't already retired. And the last point I'll say is just that it doesn't really make a big difference if Fauci retires, because the entire bureaucracy that he has spent decades creating and working in is basically made in his image. There are a million other Anthony Faucis ready to step in and do what Anthony Fauci did. So while I think he was uniquely problematic in so many different ways, I think we'll probably find once his time comes to an end, there will be other people waiting in the wings that are similar.
Rebecca, it's interesting to me that, Fauci started the pandemic as a kind of, for a little while at least, was really a bipartisan hero, just a, general, someone everyone was turning to for guidance, and was kind of minted as a new celebrity. And then as he became increasingly a polarized figure, it was then really just a hero to Team Blue. Do you think he's still viewed that way, given some of the, frustration, even I think among many liberals and Democrats with, for instance, schools being closed so long, interest in lab leak and gain of function, where he's been kind of evasive? Has his star really faded somewhat, even among people on that side of the political spectrum?
Well, he's been and here's the thing, Dr. Fauci has been in this medical game for 38 years, right? He's been in this leadership position when it comes to diseases and things like that. And so when Trump administration came up, Trump is somebody out of Hollywood. So when he appointed him as, his right-hand man when it came to getting information and giving information to the American people, especially when it came to COVID, when that position opened up for Dr. Fauci, just like Donald Trump, I think he was pushed into this, this social media star, and he's just a star in this moment. But when he started to give advice that the people weren't liking, and in the moment where people were unsure about things, people were leaning on, he's not saying anything that's real. He's a professional, and people started to literally say that what he was saying, the science wasn't actually something that was true. And I think that after 38 years of doing this, I think, I don't think it should matter whether his star is, not glowing anymore or whatever. He's done his time. I think that at this time, whether it's blue or red, which side of the coin people care about him on, he did his time, and I think that it's time to go. I don't think he really cares if he's going to get the popular vote or not.
Well, correct. And to your point, Emily, he's in his 80s. So many senior kind of leaders of our government right now, this is the oldest government we've ever had. Joe Biden, very old, even if he's replaced by Donald Trump again. Donald Trump is also up there. Nancy Pelosi, very old. We have certain senators who are, widely believed to be kind of senile at this point, still serving in office. We know who those names are. We've talked about them on the show. Why don't people just retire ever anymore? This is starting to feel like a uniquely American problem, or a problem even confined to our recent political moment. That I'm not sure what the reason for it is. I don't.
Democrats
think
especially.
Democrats especially. And it doesn't feel necessitated by whatever the weird dynamic of like excessive polarization or partisanship is going on. I'm not sure what that has to do with it, but it is the reality. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I think Fauci is a really good example because he's set to get this massive retirement package, and yet he clings on. Why? Well, I think because the power is as intoxicating as that $350,000 a year retirement package. And if you look at why this phenomenon seems to be particularly pronounced on the left right now, it's because I think there are people like Nancy Pelosi, like Joe Biden, who are anxious about the sort of left wing of the Democratic Party. So like establishment Democrats, and Bernie Sanders is fairly senior himself, but it does seem to be more concentrated in the establishment. And I think they're anxious about it, and they cling to power, first of all, because it's addicting. And even though they have tons of money, they don't need to make money. They don't need to continue the power. They've exerted power for years. But I think there's something very much about that. And Fauci's a great example. He's in his 80s. He has plenty of money to live on, but he wants to be in control.
Yeah.
So let me ask you both.
It's the power more than the money sometimes.
I do think that's the case. And in today's example of Bernie Sanders, I think it's interesting that from the left's perspective, I think part of the issue is it's so difficult to get in, especially now when you see these very concerted campaigns being mounted by the Democratic Party against leftists. You see Bakari Seller starting $1 million super PAC, specifically with the goal of keeping progressives out of office, that it does feel for progressives, once you get in there, you have to stay, because God knows when you'll get another chance. Bernie Sanders has just been idling there for 40 years without anybody being able to come and join him until 2018. But I want to ask you both this. Should we be giving Fauci a little bit of credit for maintaining the veneer for a pretty long time as being fairly nonpartisan, even in the context of the end of the Trump days, when things were getting pretty hairy in the midst of January 6th, in the midst of all of the rhetoric that was going on about the Republican Party? He managed to be relatively neutral. Do we expect for his replacement to be able to stick that kind of landing? And do you think that that's an impressive feat at all that he should get credit for? I'll start with you, Emily.
No, because I think at every opportunity he was signaling he wasn't. That's not to say I don't totally agree with the premise that he was maintaining neutrality throughout the Trump administration, because I think he did take pretty much every opportunity he could to signify that he was not with the president. And, he had fine reasons for that, I'm sure. But the premise in and of itself, I don't totally agree with. But I think in the early part of the pandemic, if he had been able to maintain that, I think, sense of professionalism and just at least the appearance of being laser focused on policy and on the people, definitely I'd be willing to give him credit for that. But I feel like that just got too shaky after the first few months. And now we know he was telling all kinds of, lies basically in that period too.
Right, but the lies are separate and apart from kind of the political statements, right? So at one point, Fauci became upset because his words were perceived as being so glowing of Donald Trump that they were used in political ads. He said something along the lines of, it's hard to imagine anybody doing anything better. It's very difficult for me to imagine any other Democrat in any senior position, in any elected office or appointed position, making that kind of statement that was even that accommodating of Donald Trump, given how much negative sentiment there was about him in the last year of his presidency. Rebecca, what do you think of that? Do you think it's likely that the next Fauci is going to be even that moderated in his tone? Do you think things have gotten better or worse since then?
Well, like I said, in that moment, Fauci coming into the limelight during a COVID-19 and nobody knowing about it and being, the president's right-hand man in that moment and being disrespected in front of the face, he's a leader in this science. He's a leader when it comes to diseases, but being disrespected by the president on air, I feel like, who can take that in that, in the public eye and everything, all the pressure is on you. What does that look like? What does that feel like? And how do you not choose a side after a while, whether it's red or blue? I think that he stood his ground in that moment. But in the next Fauci, I hope that that person can stand their ground at all times. And sometimes it may look like you're choosing one side over the other, but I think that it should be more about right or wrong, giving the correct information, even when you give out something that's confusing, clarifying. That's what we're looking for in the next person who may take this position. And as far as them being seated in these positions for long, I do think it's power over money. And it's also something that's historical. We've seen this. A lot of times these people will sit here and stop doing the work when they get into an older age, and just we'll see them not doing much, and they're holding up, this position that could be for someone else who can do a possibly better job, move a little quicker, and get stuff done. So, yeah.
Well, Rebecca and Emily, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
No problem.
Next up, Texas Congressman Kevin Brady will join us to weigh in on the inflation question, the economy, and much more. Stick around.